Hey guys, welcome back to Sleep into Power. I am NJ. This episode was inspired by a suggestion from one of you in the comments. The moment I read it, I knew it was something we needed to explore together. So, to the person who suggested tonight's subject, and to everyone who continues to share ideas and return to these journeys, thank you. Before we begin, two quiet things. Sleep into Power is now available on Spotify, where you can listen to or watch these journeys whenever you choose. And if you would like to explore these ideas further, the Sleep into Power book is available through the link in the description. Wherever you are and however you arrived here tonight, settle in. Let your body grow heavy. There is nowhere else you need to be. The greatest scams in history may not have been committed by criminals. They may not have broken a single law. They may not have required a forged document, a stolen identity, or even a deliberate lie. Some of them were never planned by anyone at all. They simply grew, slowly, quietly, across generations, the way a path grows across a field. Nobody designs a path like that. One person walks it, then another, then 1,000 more, until the grass gives way and the route seems as permanent and natural as the hills themselves. Eventually, people forget that anyone ever walked anywhere else. Ideas can work the same way. An assumption begins somewhere, perhaps for a perfectly sensible reason, in a world that no longer exists. It gets repeated, it gets taught, it gets absorbed by children who are far too young to question it. And by the time those children are grown, the idea no longer feels like an idea at all. It feels like reality. It feels like the only way things could ever be. We inherit these ideas, we repeat them, and eventually, we build entire lives around them. Tonight, we are going to examine some of those ideas together, and I want to be clear from the very beginning about what we are doing and what we are not doing. When I use the word scam tonight, I am not talking about crime. I am not suggesting a conspiracy, a hidden committee, or a shadowy group of architects who designed the modern world to trap you. What is actually true is stranger, and in a way more unsettling than any conspiracy. Most of these beliefs have no author. Many of them began as solutions, and some of them still are. A system can limit us without anyone having intended it to. A cage does not need a locksmith. Sometimes it only needs enough people to agree that the bars are normal. So the word scam, tonight, is a lens rather than an accusation. It is a way of looking freshly at things we usually look through. Because the most powerful assumptions in your life are almost certainly the ones you have never noticed holding. They are the water you swim in, and every so often, it is worth rising to the surface, just for an evening, just to see. Here is one place to start. Money can be lost and earned again. It happens every day. Fortunes collapse and are rebuilt. Possessions can be replaced. A car, a house, even a business can fail, and, years later, rise again. Almost everything we spend our days pursuing is, in some sense, recoverable. But an hour of life can never be recovered, not one. Not the hour passing right now, softly, while you rest. Not the hours you spent last week in queues and inboxes and traffic. Not the summer you were 25. Time is the only currency you spend whether or not you choose to. The only account that empties at exactly the same rate for every person who has ever lived, and the only one that accepts no deposits. Which means that every purchase you have ever made carried two prices. There was the number on the receipt, the amount of money you handed over, and there was a second price, printed nowhere, itemized by no one, the portion of your life you exchanged to earn that money in the first place. The hours at the desk, the early alarms, the evenings of attention given to someone else's priorities. When we buy something, we tend to see only the first price. The second one is invisible. It is, perhaps, the most important number in your financial life, and it appears on no statement you will ever receive. So let me ask you the question that sits at the heart of tonight's journey. You do not need to answer it now. You do not need to answer it at all. Simply let it rest somewhere in the quiet of the room. Are you earning a living, or slowly exchanging your life for one? Let that question be here with us, gently, without pressure. It is not an accusation, and not a demand that you change anything before morning. It is only a door, standing slightly open. Tonight we are going to walk through it slowly, together, in no hurry at all. Because here is the strange comfort hidden inside that question, and I want you to hear it early. The moment you become aware of an exchange, you gain something you did not have before. You gain a choice. An unexamined belief runs your life invisibly. An examined one becomes something you can keep, adjust, or set down. Nothing tonight requires you to reject the life you have built. Awareness alone is the beginning, and awareness costs nothing but a little honest attention, which you are already giving, simply by being here, simply by listening, with your eyes growing heavy and the day loosening its grip on you. Tonight we will wander through the ideas we never chose, the definitions of success we absorbed before we could spell the word, the quiet arithmetic of trading time for money, the promise that life can be postponed and collected later, with interest, the strange modern marketplace where your attention became the product, and the question that sits beneath all of it, patient as a stone, how much, in the end, is enough, and who decided? We will move slowly. There is a great deal of night ahead of us, and none of it needs to be rushed. Some of what we find may feel uncomfortably familiar, like catching your reflection in a shop window when you did not expect to. But I promise you this, we are not here to be angry tonight. We are here to see clearly, and then to rest. So take a slower breath. Feel the weight of your body being held by the bed, the chair, the pillow, whatever is beneath you. The world will still be there in the morning, with all its noise and all its invoices. But this hour, this one unrepeatable hour, belongs entirely to you. And that, as we are about to discover, makes it one of the most valuable things you own. There is a moment in almost every childhood that nobody remembers, because it does not happen all at once. It happens in 1,000 small pieces, spread across years. It is the moment a child learns what success looks like. Nobody sits the child down and explains it formally. There is no lesson plan, no ceremony. Instead, the child watches. They notice which adults are spoken about with admiration and which with pity. They notice what their parents worry about at the kitchen table when they think no one is listening. They notice what the teachers praise, what the adverts promise, what the films reward in their final scenes. Long before a child can define the word ambition, they have already absorbed an entire architecture of it. Psychologists have a phrase for the way we take in the assumptions of the people around us, without ever examining them. They call it social learning, and it is one of the most powerful forces in human development. It is, in most respects, a gift. It is how we learn language, kindness, cooperation, safety. A child who had to verify every belief from first principles would never survive. We are built to inherit. But the same channel that carries language and love also carries something else. It carries definitions. What counts as a good life, a respectable job, enough money, a proper home, a life well spent. These definitions arrive early, before the mind has any defenses, and they settle deep, below the level of conscious thought, where they quietly begin to organize everything built on top of them. Think about your own life for a moment, gently, without judgment. Somewhere inside you is a picture of what success looks like. Perhaps it is a particular kind of house, a particular salary, a title on a door, a car on a driveway, a level of respect in other people's eyes. Now ask yourself a strange question, one that very few people ever ask. Who painted that picture? Did you, at some point, sit down as a conscious adult, consider the full range of possible lives, and select this one deliberately, the way you might choose a house after viewing many? Or did the picture arrive earlier, already framed, already hung on the wall of your mind, painted by parents who were themselves handed it by their parents, retouched by teachers and television, and the particular street you happened to grow up on? For most of us, the honest answer is the second one. And here is the part that matters, that does not make the picture wrong. This is not a story about rejecting everything you were given. Some inherited beliefs are treasures: the value of honesty, the importance of showing up for people, the dignity of doing things properly. Inheritance is not the problem. The problem is inheritance without inspection. There is a difference, subtle but enormous, between a person who lives a conventional life because they examined it and chose it, and a person who lives an identical life because no alternative was ever seriously imagined. From the outside, the two lives look the same. The same commute, the same mortgage, the same Sunday routines. But from the inside, they are different worlds. One person is the author of their life. The other is a character in a story someone else began writing long ago. Consider how specific, how accidental, your inherited definitions really are. If you had been born 200 years earlier, success might have meant land and livestock. Born into a different family in the same city, it might mean scholarship, or service, or art, or simply surviving with grace. The definition you carry feels universal, but it is local. It has a postcode. It has a date of manufacture. The sociologists who study this speak of scripts. A script tells you what happens next. School, then work, then promotion, then property, then retirement. Scripts are useful. They save us from paralysis. But a script only asks one thing of its actors, and it asks it quietly: do not question the plot. So tonight, in the safety of the dark, with nothing to defend and no one watching, let a few questions drift through, the way you might let leaves drift past on the surface of a river. When did you decide how much money would be enough? Can you remember the moment? Or is the number simply there, moving slightly ahead of you, like a horizon? Did you choose your ambitions, or were they issued to you, like a uniform, in a size that was never quite measured against you? And perhaps the most revealing question of all, one worth holding softly: would you still want the life you are working towards if nobody else could ever see it? If there were no audience, no comparison, no approving nods at reunions? If the house could never be visited, the title never mentioned, the success never known? Strip away the witnesses, and what remains is what you actually want. Everything else may belong to someone else's story. Sit with that for a moment. There is no correct answer. Some people ask that question and find, to their quiet delight, that yes, they would still want exactly this. The work genuinely absorbs them. The home genuinely shelters something they love. If that is you, then what you have is not a script at all. It is a choice, and a choice examined is one of the most solid things a person can stand on. Others ask the question and feel something shift, a small, cold draft from under a door they did not know was there. If that is you, be gentle with yourself. Noticing is not failure. Noticing is the beginning of ownership. Every belief you inspect becomes yours in a way it never was before, whether you keep it, alter it, or thank it for its service and let it go. And this is the warmth hidden inside tonight's subject. Awareness is not a burden, it is the opposite. An unexamined assumption steers your life from the shadows, and you cannot negotiate with something you cannot see. But the moment an idea steps into the light, it loses its automatic authority. It has to make its case to you, the adult, rather than to the child who accepted it without terms. You do not need to renegotiate everything tonight. There is no deadline on becoming the author of your own definitions. For now, it is enough to know the wall of pictures exists, and that you are allowed, whenever you wish, to take one down, hold it to the light, and ask, kindly, who painted this, and do I still want it hanging here? Let your shoulders soften as that settles. We inherit so much, and we are allowed, slowly, at our own pace, to decide what we keep. Somewhere in the darkness before dawn, a train is moving through the outskirts of a city. Inside, under pale carriage lights, a woman rests her head against the cold window. She left home before her children woke. She will return, if the trains behave, a little before they sleep. In her bag is a laptop, a sandwich, and a coffee going cold. She is not unhappy, exactly. She is tired, in a way that has become so familiar, it no longer registers as tiredness. It simply feels like life. She is taking part in the oldest economic exchange human beings have ever devised. She is trading time for money. And before we say a single critical word about that exchange, let us give it its due, because it deserves it. Trading labor for income built the world you are resting in tonight. It raised every city, laid every road, stitched every garment, grew every harvest. It has fed billions of children and funded every hospital, school, and library that has ever opened its doors. The wage is one of civilization's great inventions. It allows a person with no land, no capital, and no inheritance to walk into the world with nothing but their hours and their skill, and walk out with a livelihood. For most of human history, that was a kind of miracle. And work itself, let us be honest about this too, is not merely a means to money. At its best, it is one of the deepest sources of meaning a human life can hold. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying the states in which people report feeling most alive, and he found, to many people's surprise, that those states occur more often in work than in leisure. Absorbed concentration, skill meeting challenge. The quiet pride of a thing done properly. Ask a carpenter running a hand along a finished joint, a nurse at the end of a shift in which she genuinely helped someone, a teacher watching an idea land in a young mind. Work can be purpose, community, identity, contribution. Millions of people love what they do, and they are not deceived for loving it. So no, tonight's argument is not that work is a scam. Anyone who tells you employment itself is a con is selling you something, usually a course. The question we are examining is quieter and more precise. It is not about whether the exchange is legitimate. It is about whether we have ever truly looked at what exactly is being exchanged. Here is the structure of the deal. In most jobs, income is connected directly to continued presence. 1 hour of availability produces 1 unit of pay. When the hours stop, the income stops, sometimes within weeks, which means that the thing being sold is not really effort or even skill. Those are the packaging. Time becomes the inventory being sold. It is a finite, non-renewable substance, issued to you once, in an unknown quantity, and spent at a fixed rate whether you sell it or not. Every other commodity in the economy can be restocked. A factory that sells its inventory makes more. A farmer who sells the harvest plants again in spring. But the woman on the train cannot manufacture more Tuesdays. Nobody can. Each of us is a shop with stock that cannot be reordered, and most of us have never once counted what is left on the shelves. This is not a morbid thought, it is simply an accurate one, and accuracy about precious things is a form of respect. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote about this 2,000 years ago, in a letter that still reads as though it were written this morning. People guard their money fiercely, he observed, yet hand their time to anyone who asks, when time is the one possession no fortune can buy back. His conclusion was not despair, it was attention. Life is long enough, he believed, if you know how to use it. Now bring that ancient observation into a modern shop. You are standing in front of something you want. The label says a number, but you know, tonight, that every label carries a second number in invisible ink. Divide the price by what you truly earn for an hour of your life, after taxes, after the commute, after the costs of simply being able to work, and the label changes. The jacket is not £80, it is a day. The car upgrade is not a monthly payment, it is every Friday afternoon for 4 years. The larger house is not a bigger mortgage. It is a decade of early alarms, measured out in advance, and promised to someone else. The American writer Henry David Thoreau, who went to live in a small cabin partly to run this exact experiment on himself, put the principle in a single sentence that has never been improved upon. The true cost of anything, he wrote, is the amount of life you must exchange for it. Not the money, the life the money took to earn. Once you have seen a price tag this way, you never entirely unsee it, and that is not a curse. It is a superpower, disguised as a discomfort. Some purchases will suddenly look absurd, and you will put them down and walk out feeling strangely rich, and others will pass the test gloriously. Yes, you will think, this is worth a week of my life. This book, this journey, this ring. And you will buy it with a clarity that makes the owning sweeter. That is what awareness does. It does not shrink your life, it concentrates it. Let us return, before we rest a moment, to the woman on the train, because she deserves an ending. Perhaps nothing about her circumstances changes this year. The mortgage is real, the children are real, the timetable is fixed. But suppose that one morning, somewhere past the retail parks and the sleeping suburbs, she begins to see her hours the way she sees her money, as something budgeted, allocated, spent on purpose. Suppose she starts asking of each obligation what she would ask of each expense. Is this worth what it costs? Not in pounds, in mornings. Nothing visible has changed. Everything has changed. She has stopped being only the inventory. She has become the shopkeeper. Feel your breathing slow a little as we set this down. There is no arithmetic you need to do tonight. The hours you are spending right now, drifting in the dark, are not being sold to anyone. They are entirely, luxuriously yours. And in the next movement, a question follows naturally. If time is the inventory, can a person build things that go on creating value even while the maker sleeps, the way you are beginning to sleep now? In a quiet room above a bookshop, long after closing, there is a shelf of novels written by a woman who died 40 years ago. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a stranger is reading one of them. Tomorrow, another stranger will buy one. The hours the author spent at her desk ended decades ago, and yet the value those hours created is still moving through the world, still comforting people, still earning, in its modest way, without her. This is the phenomenon we need to look at carefully now, because it sits at the center of one of the most repeated, most oversold, and most misunderstood ideas of the modern age. You have heard the phrase, passive income. The words are usually spoken over footage of beaches by people whose actual income comes from telling other people about passive income. Let us take the idea away from the salesman and examine what is actually true inside it, because something genuinely is. There is a real distinction between kinds of economic value. At one end sits the direct sale of hours. You are present, you work, you are paid, and the meter runs only while you stand beside it. Move along the spectrum and things begin to change shape. A consultant sells expertise rather than raw presence, and expertise can command more per hour, though the hours are still required. Further along, someone writes a book, records a song, builds a piece of software, designs a product, creates a course, or slowly assembles ownership of assets like a business or investments. Here, something interesting has happened. The labor has been separated in time from the value. The work was done once, in the past, and the result continues operating in the present, like a water wheel built years ago that still turns whenever the river runs. Economists call this leverage, and it is real. It is the honest kernel inside all the noise. A book can be read by 1 million people without the author writing it 1 million times. A song does not tire. A well-built business can serve customers while its founder sleeps. Ownership, in all its forms, is the way human beings have always separated income from the immediate hour, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But here is what the beach footage never shows you, and it matters enormously. Every one of those water wheels was built by hand, and building them was work. Usually years of it, often unpaid at the time, always uncertain. The novelist wrote 3 books nobody bought before the one everyone did. The software took evenings and weekends stacked into a tower of them. The business owner you envy carried a weight most employees never see. the payroll that must be met, whether or not customers arrive, the risk that lives in the stomach at 3 in the morning, the responsibility that never fully clocks off. And investments, the most passive-looking wheel of all, require the one ingredient hardest to come by: capital, which for most people can only be accumulated slowly, from the very time for money exchange we examined in the last movement. So passive income is almost never passive. It is postponed income. It is labor, risk, and patience, compressed and stored, released slowly later. Some wheels break, some rivers dry up. Anyone who tells you the building is easy, or guaranteed, or available to everyone in 90 days, is running a much more traditional kind of scam, the illegal kind, and the product they are selling is your hope. And yet, once you strip away the fantasy, a genuinely useful truth remains, and it is this: the exchange of hour for coin is not the only shape income can take. It is the default shape, the inherited shape, the shape most of us were shown. But a person who knows that expertise, creation, and ownership exist alongside employment is simply better informed than a person who believes selling tomorrow's hours is the only door in the corridor. You may look at the other doors and choose not to walk through them, and that is a perfectly wise conclusion. The point was never that everyone must build water wheels. The point is that a choice you did not know existed was never a choice at all. Now let us go one level deeper, to the idea underneath all of this. It may be one of the quietest and most beautiful ideas in economics. Money is stored choice. That is all it has ever been. Every pound in an account is a small packet of options waiting. It can become bread, or a train ticket, or a month of not having to say yes to something you hate, or help for someone you love. It has no value of its own. It is potential, frozen. This explains something people often feel, but rarely say. Why savings can bring a sense of peace far beyond what they could actually buy. It is not the number, it is the choices sleeping inside the number. But if money is stored choice, then time is something greater. Time is not the container of choices. Time is life itself, the raw material every choice is made from. And this is where the two currencies part ways forever. Money can be stored, saved, recovered, inherited, rebuilt. A person can be broke at 50 and comfortable at 60. It happens constantly. But nobody, in the entire history of our species, has ever earned back a single hour. You may earn more money later. You cannot earn another childhood. You cannot earn another summer at 25, another ordinary Tuesday with someone whose voice you can now only half remember, another version of the evening that is passing right now, softly, outside your window. This is not said to sadden you. It is said the way one friend tells another the truth, because knowing it changes how you hold things. People who understand that money is recoverable and time is not begin, almost without effort, to negotiate differently with the world. They spend money to buy back hours, and they stop spending hours to impress people. And once someone sees that, the entire game quietly reverses. The wealth was never the point. The wealth was the wrapper. Time was always the gift inside. So perhaps this is the first of the invisible ideas worth naming plainly. The scam was never work. Work is one of the good things a life can hold. The scam was believing that your hours were the only value you were ever allowed to create. So let this movement close with softness rather than strategy. Whatever your income looks like, tonight the market is closed. No hours are for sale in this room. The inventory is safely off the shelves. You are lying in the one portion of your fortune no one can ever bill you for, breathing slowly, spending nothing. Rest here a while. You are, in the oldest and truest sense of the word, wealthy right now. There is a phrase that may be the most expensive phrase in the English language, and it costs nothing to say. You have said it. I have said it. It is 2 words long, and entire lifetimes have quietly disappeared inside it. One day I will travel. One day I will write the book. One day I will learn the piano, mend the friendship, Take the coastal road instead of the motorway. One day I will rest properly. One day I will spend real, unhurried time with the people I love. One day, when things calm down, when the children are older, when the diary clears, I will finally begin the part of my life that I actually meant. To understand where this habit of wholesale postponement came from, we need to visit, briefly, the history of an idea so familiar that most people assume it is ancient. It is not. For nearly all of human history, there was no such thing as retirement. People worked, in fields and workshops and homes, for as long as their bodies allowed, easing gradually into lighter tasks within families and villages. The notion of a formal finish line, a birthday on which work officially ends and leisure officially begins, is barely more than a century old. Its most famous origin lies in Germany, in 1889, when Chancellor Otto von Bismarck introduced one of the world's first state pension systems. It offered support to workers who reached the age of 70. That age was lowered to 65 only later, in 1916. And it is worth pausing on that original number, because 70 was a threshold most workers of the time would never reach. Life expectancy then was low, partly because so many children died young. Those who survived into adulthood often lived far longer, yet reaching 70 remained uncommon. The pension was insurance against the misfortune of outliving your ability to work. It was never designed as a universal season of leisure that everyone would enjoy. And let it be said clearly, without cynicism, the pension is one of the most humane inventions of the modern world. Before it, old age and poverty were, for millions, the same word. Retirement systems have allowed generations to grow old with dignity instead of dread. And planning responsibly for your later years remains one of the kindest things you can do for your future self. Nothing tonight argues against the pension or the prudence of preparing. What deserves examination is something that grew up alongside the institution, quietly, like ivy on its walls. A psychological habit, a story. The story says that life has two halves, a long grey half in which you earn, defer, endure, and accumulate, and a shorter golden half at the end, in which you finally live. Under this story, the present becomes a waiting room. Joy becomes a reward you collect at the exit. The decades between 25 and 65, which happen to contain your greatest health, your deepest energy, your children's childhoods, and most of your ordinary irreplaceable days, are recast as the fee you pay for admission to a future that has been promised, but not scheduled. Delayed gratification, we should acknowledge, is a genuine strength. The capacity to give up something now for something greater later underlies every education, every harvest, every long project worth doing. A person who cannot defer anything builds nothing. But every strength has a shadow, and the shadow of deferral is this: postponement can become not a strategy, but a personality. The muscles of enjoyment, unused for decades, do not always wake on command. Ask those who work with the newly retired, and they will describe a quiet, common grief. Men and women who spent 40 years crossing days off a calendar, who finally arrive at the long-imagined shore, and find they no longer remember what they were waiting to do, or who they were before the waiting began. Identity had fused so completely with work that the retirement party felt less like a door opening and more like a name being taken away. And there is a harder truth beneath even that one, which must be spoken gently, once, and then released. The golden half is not guaranteed. Health does not sign contracts. Companions do not sign contracts. The one day we bank everything on is the only day on the calendar that is not actually on the calendar. How many one days across the human story have quietly become never? Not through tragedy, most of the time, simply through arithmetic. Through 52 Mondays a year, each one reasonable, each one busy, each one postponing the same small dream one more week, until the dream, unfed, stopped asking, breathe, let your shoulders drop. Because here is where the story turns, and it turns towards you kindly. The answer to the deferred life is not the abandoned pension or the reckless gesture. Nobody needs to resign by email at midnight. The answer is smaller and available immediately. It is the refusal to treat living and preparing as enemies. They were never meant to be sequential. They are meant to be simultaneous. You can save for 65 and still take the coastal road on Sunday. You can build the retirement fund and still write the first page of the book this week. The wisest lives are not the ones that spend everything now, nor the ones that defer everything until later. They are the ones that smuggle the future's promised joys, in small denominations, into the present, week after week, so that if the golden half arrives, it finds a person still fluent in living. And if it never arrives, the life was lived anyway. Think of it as paying yourself a pension of moments, starting now. An hour of the thing you love, deposited weekly. A trip not deferred to some day, but shrunk, if it must be, to a day trip taken this season. 10 minutes of the piano you were always going to learn. These are not consolation prizes. They are the actual substance of a life, arriving early. And notice, once more, the pattern beneath these old assumptions. The trap was never the institution. Pensions are kind. Planning is wise. The scam was not retirement. It was the quiet belief that the present exists only as the price of admission to the future. A belief like that holds its power only in the dark. You have looked at this one directly now, and that changes something. It cannot run your life invisibly anymore. So as this movement settles, let the phrase "one day" soften in your mind. Let it stop being a vault where dreams are stored, and start being what it was always meant to be, an ordinary pair of words, describing an ordinary day, like this one, because this was one of the days. This evening, this breath, this warmth, this rest. It was never in the waiting room, it was the appointment itself. You made it, you are here. Sleep is coming to meet you, unhurried, right on time. Two men leave for work in the same darkness. The first drives a delivery van across a sprawling city, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. His back aches in a way he has stopped mentioning. He is punctual, careful, honest and exhausted. And at the end of each month, after rent and food and the quiet emergencies that visit ordinary families, almost nothing remains. The second man works hard too, genuinely. He answers messages before sunrise and reads reports after midnight. But his labor flows through different machinery. He owns a share of the company whose logo is on the first man's van. When the company grows, his wealth grows, at every hour of the day, including the hours he spends asleep. Both men, if you ask them, would say they work hard. Both would be telling the truth. Hold those two lives side by side, without resentment, because between them sits one of the most deeply embedded beliefs in our culture. Work hard, and you will become wealthy. Effort in, prosperity out, like a machine with one lever. Let us begin with what is true inside the belief, because plenty is. Effort matters enormously. Discipline, consistency, reliability, the willingness to do difficult things for a long time. These qualities genuinely change outcomes, and every meaningful achievement you have ever admired contains years of them. The belief in hard work is not a lie. It is something more slippery. It is a half-truth, and half-truths are more durable than lies, because the true half keeps the false half alive. The false half is the word alone. Hard work alone creates wealth, and the two men in the darkness show us why it cannot be so. If effort were the primary input, the delivery driver, hour for hour and ache for ache, might be among the wealthiest men in the city. Wealth does not flow primarily to effort. It flows to a braid of factors, woven together so tightly that we rarely see the strands separately. Ownership, as we saw earlier, whether your work builds an asset or only a payslip. Scarcity, whether what you can do is rare or common, because pay follows scarcity far more faithfully than it follows difficulty. which is why some of the hardest jobs in any society are among the lowest paid. Education and access to it. Geography. The same skill priced wildly differently depending on where a person happened to be born. Health, timing, networks, which decide which doors you even hear about. Inherited capital, or its absence. And luck, plain luck, which the successful tend to underestimate, and the struggling are rarely allowed to mention. None of this is a political speech, and it should not become one. Beware of the two lazy conclusions, because both are for sale, loudly, everywhere. One voice says outcomes are pure merit, that every fortune is deserved and every hardship earned, which requires ignoring most of the braid. The opposite voice says outcomes are pure privilege, that effort is an illusion, and striving is for fools, which insults every person who genuinely built something and quietly steals the motive to try. What is true is unfashionably complicated. Effort is necessary and not sufficient. Two people can pour identical hours into the world and receive utterly different returns, and this can be true without either of them having done anything wrong. This matters because of what the half-truth does inside a person. Consider someone who fully believes that hard work alone creates wealth, and who then works desperately hard and remains poor. The belief leaves them only one available explanation: the fault must be mine. And so, to the exhaustion of the work itself, is added a second, heavier load, carried invisibly: shame. Millions of people are carrying it tonight. Cleaners, carers, drivers, cooks, people holding up the visible world with both hands, privately concluding that their empty accounts are a verdict on their character. If any of that shame has ever sat on your chest, hear this clearly, in the quiet, from someone with no reason to flatter you. An outcome is not a verdict. The machine was never a machine with one lever. Your effort is real, and its value is real, even where the market has priced it carelessly. And the same clear sight must be turned the other way, in fairness. The comfortable mirror myth says that the wealthy never truly worked, that every success is secretly a trick. Some fortunes are indeed mostly inheritance and timing, but many are also decades of risk, sacrifice, obsession and stamina that outsiders never witnessed. The business owner's 3 a.m. dread, the years of building before anything worked. Wisdom is the ability to hold both truths at once without dropping either. That effort is honorable and real, and that outcomes are braided from far more than effort. What does a person do with such an unglamorous truth? Something quietly liberating, actually. You retire the scoreboard. If wealth were a pure measure of effort and worth, then every bank balance would be a moral ranking, and the comparison game would be compulsory and endless. But once you see the braid, the scoreboard loses its authority. Your neighbor's fortune tells you almost nothing about your neighbor, and your own numbers tell the world almost nothing about you. Effort can go on being what it was always best at. Not a slot machine into which hours are fed in hope of jackpots, but a way of building skill, meaning self-respect and useful things, whose deepest rewards were never denominated in money anyway. Let the two men in the darkness finish their day now, and wish them both well. As they fade, notice how much lighter this belief feels once it has been looked at honestly. You are not behind. You were never in the race you thought you were in. Effort was never a debt you owed the scoreboard. It was always one of the ways a human being loves the world. Let that settle, softly, like the last light leaving a room. The day's ledger is closed. Nothing more is owed tonight. Listen, for a moment, to the way modern people answer the oldest question in the world. How are you? Busy. So busy. Manic, honestly. You know how it is. Notice the tone in which it is said. There is weariness in it, yes, but listen closer, and you will hear something else threaded through the complaint. Something almost like pride. Busy has become a boast, wearing the costume of a burden. It is the modern way of saying, I am needed, I am in demand, I matter. Somewhere in the last century, exhaustion became a status symbol, and a full calendar became something people display the way earlier generations displayed silverware. It was not always this way. For most of history, across most cultures, the display ran in the opposite direction. Leisure was the trophy. The economist Thorstein Veblen, writing at the end of the 19th century, described how the wealthy of his era advertised their status precisely by their visible freedom from labor. To be seen not working was the point. If Veblen could visit us now, he would find the signal inverted. Today, it is often the most successful who perform the longest hours, answer messages at midnight, and wear their depletion like a decoration. Busyness has become a positional good. We compete at it. And here a distinction is needed, drawn carefully, because this movement must not curdle into a sermon against effort. There are seasons of genuine, unavoidable fullness. The new baby, the sick parent, the harvest, the launch. The two jobs held together with willpower, because the rent is real. That is not a cult, that is life, met bravely. And it deserves respect, not critique. The cult is something else. The cult is busyness as identity. Busyness maintained past necessity, displayed like a badge, defended like territory. Busyness that would feel like nakedness if it were ever taken away. Because the secret of the cult, whispered in no meeting but obeyed in all of them, is that constant motion offers a strange psychological shelter. A person in motion never has to answer the stationary questions. And the stationary questions are the large ones. Is this the right direction? Do I actually want what I am hurrying towards? What would remain of me if the performance stopped? Activity numbs those questions beautifully. An urgent inbox is, among other things, a place to hide from an important life. Some people, and this is said with compassion, keep themselves busy the way other people keep the television on, not for the content, but because the silence underneath is frightening. So let us do, calmly, what the cult never permits. Let us stop and take 4 familiar words that busyness blurs together, and set them apart where we can see them. Activity is not progress. A rocking horse moves all day and arrives nowhere. It is entirely possible, and increasingly common, to have a day that is completely full and entirely empty at the same time. A day of motion without movement, of effort that leaves the important things exactly where it found them. Urgency is not importance. Urgent things ring, flash, buzz, and shout. Important things almost never do. The email demanding a reply in an hour is urgent. The friendship quietly starving from neglect is important. The tragedy of the reactive life is that it answers everything that shouts and nothing that whispers, and nearly everything that matters whispers. Movement is not direction. Speed is only a virtue when the heading is right. To a traveler on the wrong road, it is simply the rate at which things get worse. Productivity is not achievement. Producing is the generation of output. Achieving is the completion of what matters. A person can produce enormously for decades and achieve almost nothing they would name, at the end, as their own. Now, to the cult's most cherished doctrine, its deepest article of faith, that rest is the absence of usefulness, a gap between the parts of life that count. On this point, the modern sciences of the mind have returned a remarkably consistent verdict. Rest is not the absence of anything. Rest is when much of the real work happens. It is during rest, and above all during sleep, that the brain consolidates memory, moving the day's learning into long-term keeping. The wandering, idle, apparently pointless states of mind are where ideas drift loose and recombine. It is why answers so often arrive in the shower, on a walk, on the edge of sleep, precisely when the trying stops. Emotional regulation, judgment, creativity, the immune system itself, all of them are funded by rest and depleted by its absence. The philosopher Bertrand Russell argued nearly a century ago, in his essay In Praise of Idleness, that much harm comes from the belief that work is virtuous in itself. Civilization's finest fruits, he thought, had always ripened in leisure. Science has been slowly agreeing with him ever since. Which means the listener who feels a flicker of guilt right now, guilt for lying still, for spending an evening on rest as though rest needed to be earned, can let that guilt dissolve completely. You are not stealing this time from your productive life. You are funding your productive life. You are, at this very moment, doing the one task that makes every other task possible. The cult of busyness has no jurisdiction in this room. None of this asks you to abandon responsibility, and none of it glorifies idleness as a way of life. Duties are real, seasons of intensity are real, and there is deep satisfaction in a genuinely full day. The invitation is smaller and sharper, only to notice, from now on, the difference between a full day and a fooled one, and to remember that a diary crammed to the margins is not evidence of a life well spent. It is only evidence of a diary well filled. Somewhere tonight, there is an office tower standing almost empty, its lights still on over rows of vacant desks, humming softly to nobody. All that urgency, gone home. All those deadlines, asleep. The building does not miss them. The work is lying perfectly still in the dark, and the world is carrying on, and everything truly important is exactly where it was. Let your breath grow slower and deeper now, entirely unproductive, entirely perfect. Nothing to perform, nowhere to hurry. You are off the clock, and the clock, for once, is off you. No one has ever bought only an object. Stand, in your imagination, outside a shop window at dusk, the kind of window that is lit like a small theater. Behind the glass sits a watch, or a handbag, or a pair of shoes, arranged on velvet with the reverence usually reserved for relics. Now watch what actually happens in the mind of the person looking in. They are not primarily seeing straps and stitching. Layered over the object, faint as breath on the glass, is a reflection, a version of themselves, more elegant, more arrived, more respected in rooms they have not yet entered. That reflection is the real product. The object is merely its container. This is not a modern trick, and it is not entirely a trick at all. Human beings have always used objects to carry meaning. It may be one of the oldest things we do. Archaeologists find shells carried hundreds of miles and threaded into ornaments tens of thousands of years ago. Objects have always said things on our behalf. I belong to this tribe. I have this skill. I honor this god. I am this kind of person. Advertising did not invent the symbolic object. What the modern age perfected was something narrower, the industrial scale suggestion that the symbol can repair the self, that the watch does not merely say confident, but will make you confident, that the inadequacy you feel is a missing purchase, and fulfillment is in stock, and tonight there is free delivery. Here is where a finding from psychology deserves a seat beside us, because it explains so much of the strange disappointment of getting what we wanted. Researchers call it hedonic adaptation. In broad terms, human beings tend to drift back towards a familiar emotional baseline after a change, even a wonderful one, though how much and how quickly varies from person to person. One well-known study from 1978 by the psychologist Philip Brickman and his colleagues compared people who had won large lottery prizes with people who had not. The winners were not measurably happier in their daily lives. Stranger still, they reported taking less pleasure than others in life's ordinary events, as though the great win had quietly dimmed the small delights that were there all along. The new car is thrilling for a fortnight, then becomes the car. The bigger house amazes for a season, then becomes simply where you live, with more rooms to heat. This is not a flaw in us. The same capacity to adapt is what lets people survive losses that ought to break them, but it carries a consequence the shop window never mentions. The glow you are buying is largely temporary, and the identity you are buying was never in the box at all. None of this condemns beautiful things. This channel has spent many nights among craftsmanship, heritage, and quiet luxury, and there is nothing shallow about loving a thing made superbly. A hand-finished coat, a well-built watch, a chair that will outlive its owner. These are honest pleasures, and the pleasure of quality lasts in a way the pleasure of status does not. The question that separates conscious ownership from unconscious consumption is simple, and you already know it from earlier tonight. Would you still want it if nobody could ever see you with it? Loved in private, an object is a genuine pleasure. Loved only in public, it is a costume, and the audience, as we shall see, is barely watching. Now step back from the window. Having looked at what buying does to the buyer, look at what the display does to everyone else. Walk down any prosperous street and you will see the visible signals of wealth. The German cars, the branded luggage, the postcode itself. And here is what 2 centuries of financial reality whisper underneath the display. The signals are unreliable. Visible consumption tells you what someone spends. It tells you nothing about what they keep. That gleaming car may be leased. That lifestyle may be scaffolded on credit. Each month's brilliance financed by the next month's income. Behind some of the most impressive front doors live some of the most anxious ledgers, and this is said not with satisfaction but with sympathy, because performing wealth is expensive, and the performance, once begun, is difficult to stop. Meanwhile, researchers who study actual millionaires keep finding a duller picture. Modest cars, old jumpers, unremarkable houses, wealth that never bothered to wave. Looking rich and being financially secure are not merely different things. They are often competing purchases. Every pound spent broadcasting the appearance of wealth is a pound unavailable for the substance of it. And there is a mechanism, patient and almost invisible, that keeps even rising incomes from ever producing the promised ease. It is called lifestyle inflation, and it works like this. As income grows, expectations grow beside it, step for step, like a shadow. The pay rise arrives, and within a year, the larger flat and the upgraded everything have absorbed it entirely, and the sense of pressure is mysteriously unchanged. A person can double their income across a decade and feel no freer at the end of it, because the cage was refurbished at exactly the pace the income grew. More was purchased, nothing was released. Which brings us to the gentle inversion at the heart of this whole movement, the thought worth keeping when everything else fades. The most valuable forms of wealth are the invisible ones. An unremarkable evening with no financial dread in it. The ability to say no to work that would cost your health, and yes to a slow morning. Privacy. Options. The unphotographable luxury of time with people you love. Unhurried, unperformed. No shop window will ever display these, because they cannot be stocked, and no passerby will ever envy them, because they cannot be seen. They are wealth with no audience, which is to say, the only kind that was ever entirely yours. So here is another of the invisible ideas, named plainly. The scam was not ownership. Beautiful things can be loved honestly. The scam was confusing the appearance of wealth with the experience of freedom, and paying for the first with the very hours that might have bought the second. So let the shop window go dark now. The little theater closes at night, and notice, without moving, how many of the invisible luxuries are already here in this room. Quiet, safety, rest arriving on schedule, a mind slowly letting go of its lists. Nobody watching, nothing to signal, no reflection to maintain. By the only measures that cannot be counterfeited, this moment is affluent. Breathe it in slowly, like something rare. It is. Every loan is an agreement between 2 people, and one of them does not exist yet. When a person signs for credit, the signature on the paper is theirs, but the obligation belongs to someone else, a future self, months or years away, whose circumstances cannot be known, and who was not in the room when the decision was made. Debt is time travel for money. It reaches forward into tomorrow's labor and pulls a portion of it back into today. That is its magic, and its weight, in a single mechanism. Let it be said plainly and early, debt is a tool, and tools are innocent. The condemnation of borrowing as a vice is as shallow as its celebration as a lifestyle. A mortgage is a machine that lets an ordinary family live inside a home for decades while paying for it, rather than saving for 40 years to buy one at the end. A student loan can purchase an education that repays itself many times over. Business credit has built most of the enterprises whose names you know. Entire economies stand on the sensible movement of money, from those who have it now to those who can use it now. When debt buys an asset that grows, or a capability that earns, it can be one of the wisest transactions a person ever makes. Bridges are built with borrowed money, in every sense. But hold the tool up to tonight's particular light, the light of the invisible second price, and something worth seeing appears on its surface. Remember the exchange we uncovered earlier. Money is earned with hours of life. Follow that thread through a loan, and you arrive somewhere quietly startling. To borrow money is to spend hours you have not yet lived. The signature commits not future pounds, exactly, but the future mornings that will earn them. Somewhere ahead of you on the road stands that future self, and a portion of their weeks has already been assigned, allocated years in advance by a person they may barely resemble. Interest, in this light, is simply the exchange rate between present desire and future time. And at certain rates, the ones printed small on store cards and payday agreements, the future self pays 2 or 3 hours for every hour the present self enjoyed. Modern commerce discovered something profound about this arrangement and built an industry on it. The two selves never have to meet. In the era of cash, buying and paying were the same event. The pleasure of the purchase and the pain of the payment arrived together, and the pain informed the decision. Behavioral economists have shown what everyday experience confirms. As payment becomes more abstract, from cash to card to a single tap, and then to a tap that quietly splits itself into installments, spending tends to rise, because the feeling of paying fades. The genius of frictionless credit is that it separates the enjoying self from the paying self by weeks of merciful distance. The purchase happens in sunshine. The invoice arrives in ordinary weather, addressed to someone slightly poorer. Nothing about this requires a villain. It only requires a system optimized, at every step, to make the second price harder to feel. And now this movement must soften, deliberately, because the subject demands it. If debt is a part of your life tonight, and for a great many people listening it is, hear what follows as it is meant. There is a particular shame that attaches itself to owing money, a private, heavy, 3 in the morning shame, and much of it is unearned. The comfortable myth says debt is what happens to the frivolous. The reality, visible in every honest study of household finance, is that an enormous share of consumer debt is not frivolity at all. It is the boiler that failed in January. It is the medical months, the redundancy that arrived without warning, the rent that rose faster than the wage, the gap between an ordinary emergency and an ordinary income. Borrowing across that gap is not a character flaw. It is what the bridge was for. And even where the borrowing did come from unexamined habits, from the very shop window spells of a moment ago, it was a lesson bought at retail price. A lesson examined is a debt already losing its power over you. A number describes your situation. It has never once described your worth. What then is the examined relationship with this tool? Not fear and not fluency in someone else's marketing, but a single habit of translation performed at the moment of signing. Before borrowing, ask the question in both currencies. Not only, can the payments be made, but also, what am I asking of the person ahead of me on the road? Am I handing them an asset, a home, an education, a capability, something they will thank me for carrying? Or am I handing them only a receipt for a pleasure they will not remember, and a standing order against their mornings? Sometimes the answer is genuinely yes, borrow, build the bridge, the future self votes in favor. The examined life does not forbid the tool. It only insists that both selves be present at the signing. Enough. The ledgers can close now. They keep perfectly well overnight. Whatever is owed, by you or to you, nothing about it can be signed, paid, or improved at this hour. And the future self we have spoken of wants exactly one thing from you tonight. The same thing they always wanted, that you arrived to them rested. So pay yourself the one debt that settles instantly. Deep breath in, held a moment like a coin in the palm, and out, paid in full. Before we walk the last stretch of tonight's road, let us rest a while at its halfway point, and simply watch some people pass. Ideas, however carefully examined, are only ever half the story. The other half has faces. So dim the analysis for a few minutes. No arguments now, only portraits, passing slowly, like windows on a night train. Here is the first. A man in his 50s, in a workshop that smells of cedar shavings and linseed oil, planing a length of timber by hand, although a machine stands 3 feet away that could do it in seconds. He is a joiner, as his father was, and he is not wealthy and never will be, and he knows it, and it has been years since that knowledge cost him a night's sleep. Watch his hands. There is 40 years of listening in them. The wood tells him things through the plane that no instrument could measure. The work pays him twice, once in money, and once in the thing he becomes by doing it. When people speak of the dignity of labor, this is not an abstraction to him. It is Tuesday. Not every exchange of time for money is a loss. Some of it, done like this, is a way of being fully alive. Here is the second. A woman stepping off a late train in the rain, 34 years old, a lanyard still around her neck that she has forgotten to remove. She climbs the stairs of her building softly, lets herself in softly, and stands for a moment in the doorway of a small bedroom, watching a child sleep, a child who was awake when she left this morning and asleep when she returned, so that today, for her daughter, she has effectively not existed. She is doing all of this for the child. That is the sentence she says to herself on the train, and it is true. And she knows the other sentence too, the one that only comes out in doorways, that the child is not accumulating a future. The child is 4, and being 4 is happening now, at full speed, unrepeatable. She is not wrong to work, and she is not wrong to ache. She is simply standing where two true things meet, which is where most adults live. Tomorrow she will move one small thing. A meeting declined, a morning traded, some modest renegotiation with the machine. It will not solve the arithmetic. It will matter anyway. Small sovereignties, remember, are still sovereignty. Here is the third. A man at a dinner table, his family around him, his thumb moving against his phone below the table's edge, answering a message that genuinely could have waited, from a person who is also, at this very moment, at a dinner table somewhere, answering him. Neither man is a fool. Each believes the other is waiting. 2 families, 2 tables, one entirely imaginary emergency, suspended between 2 phones like a rope. Neither man knows he is allowed to drop. Do not laugh at him. You have been him. So have I. Notice instead how little malice the situation contains, how the whole marketplace of urgency runs on nothing but 2 decent men politely serving the other's assumed impatience. One evening soon, one of them will simply not reply until morning, and the world will not end, and the discovery of that fact will feel like a window opening. Here is the fourth. A woman in her 60s, 10 months retired from a career of 39 years, standing in her garden at 11 on a Tuesday morning with a cup of tea, feeling something she is embarrassed to name, because she has arrived. The pension is sound. The time is finally endlessly hers, and she feels like a country whose government has resigned. For 39 years, the question, "Who are you?" had an answer that fitted in 3 words, and no one had told her she had been renting her identity from her diary. This morning she signed up to teach reading to children at the local library, 2 afternoons a week, and something in her chest has shifted its weight, like cargo finding its place on a ship. The lesson she would tell you, if she could: do not wait until the leaving party to find out what is underneath the lanyard. Build the underneath as you go. It was never her fault that nobody said so. Here is the fifth. A man in a beautiful car, at night, parked outside a house that estate agents would photograph from a low angle to make it look even larger than it is. Both are paid for. All of it paid for, the number reached, the summit gained, the whole catalogue of his 20-year-old vows redeemed. He is sitting in the dark of the drive because he had, tonight, on the motorway, the thought he has been outrunning for 2 years, and it finally drew level with him at 70 miles an hour. The finish line has moved again, and he is tired, and he no longer remembers whether the race was his idea. What happens next is the whole reason his portrait hangs here. He does not sell the house. He does not renounce anything, or storm anywhere, or post a manifesto. He goes inside, and for the first time in years, does not check the numbers before bed. It sounds like nothing. Sitting where he is sitting, it is the largest transaction of his year, the first pound of ransom paid to himself. The examined life rarely begins with an earthquake. It usually begins exactly like this, with one small decided evening. Let the train windows go dark now, the portraits sliding away into the night. The joiner sleeps beside his tools. The mother sleeps at last across the hall from her daughter. The 2 phones lie face down in 2 houses. Every face on this road wanted the same few things: to matter, to be safe, to be loved, and to have their hours count for something. So do you. It was never a complicated wish. It only got buried under complicated arrangements. Breathe out, long and unhurried, and feel the road resume beneath us, softer now, downhill the rest of the way. 2 lanterns left to light, and then the deep dark, and rest. In 1971, long before the first smartphone, an economist named Herbert Simon looked at the coming flood of information and made a prediction of almost eerie precision. Information, he observed, consumes something, and what it consumes is the attention of the people receiving it. Therefore, he reasoned, a wealth of information would create a scarcity of whatever information devours. A world drowning in content would become a world starving for attention. Half a century later, we live inside his sentence. Consider, calmly, the strangest market that has ever existed. Strangest because almost nobody who trades in it realizes they are at a market at all. Every day, several billion people use services that cost them nothing. No fee, no subscription, no coin at any counter. Search engines, social platforms, video feeds, maps of the entire Earth, all free, all magnificent, all somehow returning fortunes that dwarf the industries of previous centuries. And so the old question rises, the one worth asking of anything free. If no money is changing hands at the front of the shop, what is being sold at the back? The answer is not sinister, and stating it requires no conspiracy, only accounting. The product is attention. Advertisers pay for human attention. The platforms assemble it, and the users supply it. Your gaze, aggregated with billions of others, sorted by interest and mood and hour of the day, is the harvest. This is simply the business model, published in every annual report. Nobody lied. It is only that the transaction was arranged so gracefully that one side of it rarely notices the counter. And here the story requires its balance, because the machinery deserves honest praise before honest examination. These tools are among the marvels of our species. A child in a remote village can access more knowledge tonight than the library of any king in history. The lonely have found their people across oceans. The curious have found teachers. Families scattered by economics see each other's faces every evening. Whole crafts and languages have been kept alive in the palm of the hand. That is all true, and no honest account may leave it out. The devices are not villains, they are amplifiers, and they amplify in whichever direction they are pointed. The examination begins with who does the pointing, because a marketplace for attention has one structural incentive that explains nearly everything about how the modern digital world feels. Whatever holds the gaze longest wins. not what informs best, or nourishes best, or leaves you gladdest to have looked. Simply what holds. And so, without any committee of villains, through nothing more mysterious than measurement and iteration, the environment has been progressively tuned for holding, the feed that never ends. So no natural stopping point ever asks whether you wish to stop. The notification that arrives unpredictably, because unpredictable rewards, as psychology established generations ago, with far simpler machines, produce the most persistent checking, the autoplay countdown that makes continuing the default and stopping the decision. The algorithm that learns, with each glance, a little more about what your particular mind cannot look away from. Each feature is small. Together, they compose an environment in which the path of least resistance, hour after hour, leads through the marketplace. The result is not usually the dramatic addiction of headlines. It is something gentler and more universal. Fragmentation. Attention that once fell in long unbroken hours now falls as confetti. As studies of modern device habits find people checking their phones dozens, even hundreds of times a day, work is sliced into intervals too short for depth. Evenings vanish without a single memory to show for them. And, most telling of all, there is the reach. You have felt the reach. The hand moving towards the phone with no decision made. In the lift, at the kettle, at the traffic light, in the pause of a conversation, the motion completing itself before intention was ever consulted. Each glance costs almost nothing. That is the accounting trick. The pieces are priced in seconds, and the total is invoiced in years. Because attention, follow the thread with me now, was never really the smallest unit of currency. Attention is how time is spent from the inside. Your experience of being alive is nothing more or less than the sequence of things you attended to. The philosopher and psychologist William James saw this over a century ago, writing that our experience simply is what we agree to attend to, which means the marketplace we have been describing does not merely trade in glances. Traded in sufficient volume, it is trading in the substance of biography, in the material lives are made of. The second price again, one final time, in its subtlest form. The apps are free. The confetti was your evenings. And what might sustained attention have built? That is the question that stings a little, so let it also console. Everything you have ever admired was made of the very substance the feed dissolves. Attention, held. Every book was attention held for years. Every skill, every deep friendship, every act of mastery, every prayer. The capacity is not gone. This is the fact the gloomier stories miss. Attention is not a fixed inheritance that the machines have quietly spent. It is more like a muscle, and muscles answer to training in both directions. Minds re-lengthen. People who return to long reading find, after a few restless weeks, the old depth waiting. The instrument is repairable, and you are, at this very moment, proving it. Nearly an hour deep into a single unbroken thread of thought, your attention held not by autoplay or flashing rewards, but by the oldest holding technology there is, a voice in the dark, telling you something true, slowly. There is no crusade to join here, no purge required. The tools are staying, and they should. The marvels are real. The examined life asks something much smaller and much harder than abandonment. It asks for the return of the deciding, that the reaching hand occasionally pause mid-air for one breath, long enough for a single question to catch up with it. Did I choose this, or did it choose me? Some glances will pass the question easily. Let them proceed with a clear conscience. Others will dissolve under it, sheepishly, the way all spells do in direct light. That pause, one breath long, repeated without drama over ordinary days, is the entire revolution. The marketplace can only harvest what is surrendered without a decision. The decided gaze was never for sale, and so the scam was not technology. The tools give more than they take, when we hold them well. The scam was forgetting that your attention has enormous value, precisely because no invoice ever arrives to remind you of it. Now let the marketplace close for the night. Somewhere the feeds are still scrolling for no one. The badges are turning red in sleeping houses, and none of it requires you. This hour was never fragmented. You attended, fully, to one thing, and it is the thing you are becoming. Someone quieter, heavier-limbed, gathered back into a single piece. Let your attention loosen its grip now, like a hand opening in warm water. It has nowhere to be sold, nowhere to be spent. For the rest of tonight, it is not currency at all. It is just yours, going gently dark, the way a theater goes dark, so the dreaming can start. Somewhere in the world tonight, a runner is crossing a finish line she has imagined for 10 years. Give her a name and a summit, whichever kind you like. The promotion finally announced, the book finally published, the debt finally cleared, the house finally bought. She has pictured this exact moment through a decade of early mornings, and now she stands inside the picture at last, and something is wrong, or rather, something is missing that was supposed to be here. There is joy, yes, a real flare of it, but it is smaller than advertised, and it is already cooling. And from somewhere just past the finish line, faint but unmistakable, comes a sound she recognizes, because she has heard it before, at every summit of her life. It is the sound of the finish line moving. Psychologists have names for the two halves of what has just happened to her. The first we have already met tonight, hedonic adaptation, the quiet return towards baseline after even wonderful change. The second is subtler. Researchers of happiness call it the arrival fallacy, the deeply held, endlessly disproven belief that reaching the destination will transform the traveler. It never quite does, and the reason is almost embarrassingly simple. The person who arrives is the same person who traveled, carrying the same inner weather. Wherever you go, the old line says, there you are. And so the mind, finding itself unchanged at the summit, does the only thing it knows. It selects a new summit and explains, in a reasonable voice, that this next one is the real one. When I earn a little more, when I lose the weight, when the house is done, when they finally recognize what I do. Then, says the voice, then you will feel like enough. Notice the shape of the promise. It is always the same promise, and it has always just moved. But this private treadmill does not spin in a vacuum. It spins inside an economy, and that economy noticed long ago that the feeling of not enough is among the most commercially productive feelings a human being can have. A person who feels complete this evening is a poor customer. A person with a gap in them is a market. Say this carefully, because the truth here is genuinely two-sided. There is no committee of villains manufacturing your insecurity. Markets are mostly mirrors, responding to desires humans already had. People wished to be lovely, youthful, admired and comfortable, long before anyone advertised anything. But mirrors can be angled, and a century of commercial persuasion has learned to angle them with great skill. The classic structure of an advertisement, taught in every marketing course on earth, is a small story in 3 acts. Here is a lack you had perhaps not noticed. Feel it now. Here is the product that closes it. Not older, but aging, and here is the cream. Not ordinary, but behind, and here is the car, the course, the upgrade. Whole industries stand in the gap between who you are and who you were just now invited to feel you should be, and the gap, examined honestly, was often installed moments before the solution was offered. And in our own era, the mirror found its perfect angle. Social platforms placed into every pocket an infinite gallery of other people's edited best. The holidays without the arguments, the kitchens without the mess, the careers without the dread. Each image true in the narrow sense, and curated in every other. The psychologist Leon Festinger observed in the 1950s that human beings evaluate themselves by comparison with others. It is apparently something we cannot help. But for all previous history, we compared ourselves with the village, a few dozen ordinary, visible, complete lives. Now the village is global, filtered, and highlights only. Each of us privately measures our own unedited interior against a parade of other people's exteriors. It is the most rigged comparison ever constructed, and it is checked, on average, dozens of times a day. Small wonder that enough keeps receding. The finish line is not only moving now, it is being moved, in real time, by everything the thumb touches. So stop, here, in the dark, where none of that can reach, and let us ask the question that all of this machinery depends on never being asked directly. Can an external thing permanently answer an internal question? Sit with it. Every summit the voice has ever promised, money, recognition, the body, the house, has one property in common. It is outside. And the ache it is prescribed for, the not enough feeling, lives inside, where a person keeps their verdict on themselves. The whole treadmill rests on a quiet category error, trying to close an internal gap with external deliveries. It is like posting letters to a locked house. The deliveries are real, some of them wonderful, and none of them can get inside, because the ache was never a shortage of parcels. Achievements decorate a life. They cannot, no matter how they gleam, decorate their way to a settled heart. If the summit will not settle it, what does? Be wary of anyone with a tidy answer. But the research on human flourishing keeps circling a few unglamorous landmarks, and one deserves its moment here. Psychologists who study gratitude properly, with control groups and long follow-ups, keep finding that the deliberate noticing of what is already present measurably lifts well-being, not as magic, as redirected attention. And understand what gratitude is not. It is not a technique for attracting more, and it is not an argument that anyone should be content with injustice, poverty, or grief. Some circumstances need changing, not appreciating. Gratitude is the practice of counting what the finish line voice is trained to skip, everything already crossed, already held, already here. The voice says, look what is missing. Gratitude says, yes, and look what is not. And the runner at her summit, leave her well, because her story bends kindly. Somewhere between this finish line and the next, she stops, breathing hard, and finally hears the pattern in the moving line, the same pattern you have just heard. She does not stop achieving. That was never the choice on offer, and ambition, pointed well, is a beautiful engine. What changes is smaller. She stops asking the summits to tell her she is enough. She removes that one item from their job description, the one they were always going to fail at, and carries the question home, where it lives, and answers it herself. That option was always available. It is available at this hour, in this room, without a single condition being met first. Whatever remains unfinished in your life, and something always remains, the permission to feel complete tonight was never actually being held by the finish line. It was only ever waiting for you to stop asking the wrong office. So the scam was not ambition. Ambition, pointed well, builds beautiful things. The scam was believing that happiness had to remain one achievement ahead of you, forever, just out of reach. So let the parade of other lives dim. Let the gallery close. There is no comparison possible in the dark, and nothing missing that this hour requires. You, unedited, unfiltered, half asleep, enough, as you are, before anything improves. Rest inside that for a while. It is not the end of your ambitions. It is just the end of the chase, for tonight, which is the only place a chase can ever be ended. Here, now, gently, in the deciding. There are 3 doors along the corridor of the postponed life, and though they look nothing alike, they open onto the same room. Above the first door is written certainty, above the second, readiness, above the third, the perfect time. Behind all 3 is a waiting room, and in the waiting room, comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and years. Begin with the first door, because it is the oldest. Human beings have always craved guarantees. The wish is not foolish. It is structural. A mind built by evolution to survive dislikes the unknown for excellent ancestral reasons, and so it reaches, instinctively, for anyone offering to remove it. The forecaster who knows where markets are going. The guru who knows how the universe works. The influencer with the 7 guaranteed steps. The ideology with an answer for everything, which is always the sign to check the answers. Certainty has always found sellers, because it has always found buyers, and the price is rarely money alone. The deeper price is the outsourcing of judgment, the quiet handing over of one's own thinking to whichever voice sounds most sure. Be careful here, to keep the balance that separates wisdom from cynicism. Expertise is real and precious. The physician who has seen 10,000 cases, the engineer who knows why bridges stand, the researcher who has spent a life inside one hard question. These people know things, and a culture that stops trusting genuine knowledge does not become free, it becomes lost. The examined life is not the suspicious life. The distinction worth carrying is this: real experts traffic in probabilities, evidence, and honest uncertainty. Sellers of certainty traffic in guarantees. The more absolute the promise, the more of your skepticism it deserves. Doubt, in the right dose, is not the enemy of knowledge. It is its immune system. And underneath the buying and selling sits the plain condition: no product has ever changed. Life is uncertain, has always been, and will remain so. Every plan is a wager. The demand for a guarantee before action is a demand that can never be met, which makes it not a standard at all, but a door into the waiting room. The second door, readiness, is more beautiful, and therefore more dangerous, because the corridor to it is lined with genuinely good things. Books, courses, podcasts, seminars, mentors. Growth is real, and the desire to improve is among the noblest human appetites. But somewhere in recent decades, self-improvement became an industry, and industries require ongoing customers, and an ongoing customer of improvement is a person who never quite arrives at improved. So the shelves fill, and the paradox blooms. Seekers who have read 40 books on beginning, and not begun. Students of confidence, years deep in study, still waiting to feel confident enough to start. People fluent in the vocabulary of growth, who privately hold the same verdict they started with, that the current self is a draft, unfit for use, pending upgrades. Watch the sleight of hand at the center of it, because it is the same category, error-wearing scholars' robes. Improving because you value yourself is growth. A gardener tends a garden she loves. Improving because you believe the present self is unacceptable is not growth at all. It is self-rejection on a payment plan, and no amount of development ever settles it, because the verdict was never really about the skills. Preparation, past a certain point, quietly becomes the most respectable form of procrastination ever invented. One can hide inside a curriculum for decades, and the world will even applaud, because from the outside, hiding and diligence look identical, which reveals the third door as merely the first two wearing a watch, the perfect time, when there is more money, more confidence, more knowledge, more certainty. When the children are older, or the job is calmer, or the world is steadier, then the venture, the conversation, the change, the beginning. The perfect time has one property that distinguishes it from all other times. It does not occur. Conditions never align completely for anything that matters. Something is always unresolved, because that is what being alive is. And so waiting for alignment is not patience. Here is the uncomfortable kindness at the heart of this movement. Much of what wears patience's clothing is fear, and fear in patience's clothing is invisible, even to its owner. Patience has a date in mind. Fear only has reasons. What actually dissolves the waiting rooms? Not recklessness. Let that be said firmly. Preparation matters. Prudence matters. And some seasons genuinely are wrong for some leaps. The person who researches the risk and consults the map is behaving like an adult. The dissolving truth is quieter, and everyone who has ever started anything confirms it from the far side. Readiness is not a precondition of action. it is a product of it. Confidence does not precede the doing. It is manufactured by the doing, in small installments, each act producing the exact substance the waiting room promised and never delivered. The swimmer becomes ready in the water. The writer becomes a writer on the page, not before it. Begin badly, the old advice goes. But begin. The beginning can be improved. The not beginning cannot. And so the 3 doors come down to one small, immediate practice, gentle enough for tonight. Whatever it is that has been waiting, and there is something, there is always something. It does not need your leap this week. It needs only the smallest true step, sized to fit inside an ordinary day. The first paragraph, the inquiry sent, the 10 minutes at the instrument, the honest sentence spoken aloud to one safe person. Steps that small require no certainty, no completed curriculum, and no perfect season. They fit through the gap under all 3 doors. And each one, quietly, teaches the nervous system the only lesson it ever needed, that the floor holds. And so the scam was not self-improvement. Growth is a fine and honest thing. The scam was believing that peace must be withheld from you until you finally become someone else. Enough of corridors. You are not in a waiting room now. You are in a resting room, which looks similar and is the opposite, because waiting strains towards a future and resting settles into a present. Nothing is postponed here. Sleep does not require you to be ready, certain, or improved. It takes you exactly as the day left you, which is, and always was, enough to begin. Let the 3 doors stand open behind you, airing out. Tomorrow, or some tomorrow soon, a small true step. Tonight, only this, breath after breath, arriving on time, no preparation required. There is a life plan so familiar that most people could recite it half asleep, which is fitting, since that is roughly how it is usually adopted. School, then qualifications. Qualifications, then employment. Employment, then advancement. Advancement, then property. Property, then accumulation, and accumulation, at last, retirement, arriving like a train we discussed some hours ago. Call it the approved life, because approval is precisely what it runs on. Follow the sequence and the world nods at every station. Relatives reassured, forms easily filled, futures easily explained at weddings. And let this be established immediately, before anything else is said. The approved life can be a genuinely wonderful life. Within that ordinary sequence live extraordinary things. Crafts mastered across patient decades. Children raised into good adults. Communities held together by people who stayed. Loves deepened by routine rather than eroded by it. Many people have examined the standard path with fully open eyes and chosen it, freely and gladly, and their choice deserves nothing but respect. The path was never the problem. The problem is a single silent word that attached itself to the path somewhere along the way, only. The belief that this is not a respectable route, but the respectable route, the one shape of life that needs no explanation, so that every other arrangement, the craftsman content in a small workshop, the couple who chose freedom over square footage, the carer, the wanderer, exists under a faint, permanent obligation to justify itself at dinner parties. Watch what people apologize for, and you will see the approved life enforcing its borders. I know it is not much of a career, says the happiest man in the village. I know we should really buy somewhere, say the couple whose rented flat has hosted a decade of laughter. Justifying joy to a sequence, that is the tell. Because human beings hold many goods, and they refuse to be ranked on one scale. Some build lives around family, some around service, or craft, or knowledge, or faith, or adventure, or privacy, or, yes, around wealth. And wealth is a legitimate love among the others. The point is not that any model is superior. The point is that no universal arrangement exists, and never has. Every claim otherwise is somebody's local script, traveling in disguise, as a law of nature. You learned to spot that disguise hours ago. So here is the question this movement turns on. and it is one of the largest questions a person can carry into sleep. What would your life look like if success were defined privately rather than publicly? Not what could you defend at the reunion. What would you build if the jury went home? Which brings us to the jury, because the approved life is enforced by something, and the something is approval itself. Perhaps the most underestimated currency on earth. Do not mock the need for it. It is load-bearing. Humans are herd animals down to the bone. For our ancestors, the tribe's acceptance was not vanity but survival, and exile was a death sentence served slowly. The dread of judgment, the flush of shame, the hunger to belong. This is ancient equipment. It is in all of us, and no one should be embarrassed to own it. Belonging is a genuine human need. The answer to approval's tyranny was never isolation, the hermit's error, the cynic's error. Connection is not the cage is performance. There is a difference, invisible from outside and unmistakable from inside, between living among others and living for their verdict, between a self that is expressed and a self that is staged. The staged life makes its choices with one eye permanently on the gallery, the career selected for its sound at parties, the opinions adjusted to the room, the possessions purchased, as we saw in the shop window, for their reflection in other eyes. And the staged life has a cost, payable daily, the exhaustion of the performance, the loneliness of being applauded for a character, the slow forgetting of what the unwatched self actually wants. Ask it plainly, the way one can only ask in the dark. How many of your choices are genuinely yours? How much of your personality is a costume worn so long it has begun to feel like skin? What would you choose if nobody could ever applaud or criticize again? And here, told at last, is the joke hidden inside the whole apparatus, the one that sets people free when it finally lands. The audience is not watching. It never was, not really. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. In careful experiments, people drastically overestimate how much others notice their appearance, their errors, their triumphs. The gallery you have been performing for is a hall of people facing the other way, each performing for a gallery of their own, each convinced that they are the watched one. Nobody is thinking about your house at 2 in the morning. They are thinking about theirs. The prison was crowdsourced, and the guards are all inmates. You may step out more or less whenever you like. Suppose, then, that a person does step out and begins defining success privately, spending time and money by their own lights. One question remains, waiting at the center of the maze. Privately, honestly, by your own definition, how much is enough? Enough money, enough house, enough achievement, recognition, security, ambition fulfilled. Have you ever set the number? Has anyone? Because here is what observers of human striving have reported for as long as striving has been observed. Unset, the number moves. Approach it and it recedes, smoothly, like the horizon it is. The economist John Maynard Keynes, writing in 1930, predicted that within a century, his grandchildren's generation would work perhaps 15 hours a week, because technology would by then meet all real needs. About the wealth, he was broadly right. Living standards in the advanced economies rose several times over, close to what he foresaw, but the 15-hour week never arrived. The needs, it turned out, could multiply faster than the machines, because past a certain point, they were no longer needs at all. They were comparisons, and comparisons have no ceiling. More, it transpires, is not a destination. More is a direction, and no amount of travel completes a direction. There is a story told in many versions of a novelist at a billionaire's party who replies to the fortunes around him that he possesses something the host will never have: enough. Whether or not it happened just so, it survives because it names the only two kinds of wealth there finally are. One is a number that moves, the other is a decision that doesn't. And notice what the decision is made of. It is not made of money at all. Enough is not a sum. It is a relationship with a sum, which is why it has been reached by people of modest means, and missed entirely by kings, and why it cannot be purchased, inherited or stolen, only decided. Money remains what it has always been, genuinely powerful. Security, comfort, healthcare, education, doors, the profound pleasure of helping. Honor it. But asked to provide identity, love, or a permanent verdict of enough, it fails at the exact moment of delivery, every time, not because it is evil, but because those were never in its power to give. The failure is not money's, the failure is the job description. So this movement closes with the quietest exercise of the night. No effort required, only honesty. Somewhere in you is a picture of sufficiency, a life in which, truly, enough would be present. People, mornings, work that means something, a door that locks, a table that gathers. Look at it a moment, notice, and do not be startled, how much of it may already be installed, unphotographed, uncounted, here. The horizon number is still out there, moving, and it will move forever. That is its nature. But you are not obliged to chase a horizon. It was never chasing you. Enough. What a word to fall asleep inside. Say it once, silently, not as a hope but as a decision, the kind no audience can ratify and none can veto. Enough. Tonight. Enough. This room. This breath. This closing hour. The performance is over. The gallery has gone home. And the reviews, at last, are yours to write. We have traveled a long way tonight, and now the road turns for home. Look back once, briefly, at the country we crossed, the path worn across the field, mistaken for the only way, the pictures of success, hung on our walls by hands we never saw, the oldest exchange, hours for coins, honorable and unexamined, the water wheels, and the truth that money is stored choice, while time is life itself, the waiting room called one day, the half-truth of effort, and the shame it never deserved to cause, the busy calendar mistaken for a meaningful one, the shop window, with our better self reflected in it, the stranger ahead of us on the road, spending our signatures, the quiet marketplace where attention became the harvest, the finish line that moves, and the ache no parcel reaches, the three doors of the postponed life, the audience that was never watching, and the number that was never going to stop. 18 beliefs, more or less, and notice what every single one had in common. Not one of them was a crime, not one required a villain. They were paths, worn smooth by good people walking, and their entire power, every ounce of it, lay in not being seen. That is why tonight required no anger, and why you feel none now. Assumptions examined in lamplight lose their authority without a single battle. Seeing was the whole work, and the seeing is done. So let it be said very plainly, here at the turning, you are not being handed a list of instructions. There is no escape plan because you were never shown a prison, only a script. And scripts are not escaped, they are edited, slowly, by their authors. And the author, as of tonight, is awake to the job. You do not need to resign, sell, renounce, or announce anything. Most of what you have built, you built for good reasons, and much of it, examined, you will simply keep, and it will be more yours for having been chosen twice. What remains are only questions, and they are yours now, to carry lightly, the way one carries seeds rather than stones. Which of my beliefs did I choose, and which did I inherit? What is money for in my one particular life? What is my time for? What do I love when nobody is watching? What am I postponing that could be smuggled, in some small denomination, into this very week? And what does enough mean? To me, decided privately, in a voice no gallery can veto. None of these needs answering tonight. Seeds are not harvested the evening they are planted. Some will answer themselves in odd moments, months from now, at traffic lights and kitchen sinks, and each answer will move something real, because awareness, remember, is not the consolation prize of those who cannot change their circumstances. It is where every change of circumstances has ever begun. And if some circumstances cannot change soon, the job, the obligations, the season of life, then hear this, softly, one last time. Reflection was never meant to become another whip. A person who sees clearly and must wait is not failing. They are preparing in the only way that counts. Small sovereignties are still sovereignty. An hour reclaimed, a comparison declined, a purchase translated into its true price and set down, smiling. A phone left in another room while somebody you love tells you about their day. These are not minor. Lives are made of exactly this, and of nothing else. Perhaps freedom does not begin when you finally possess enough money to escape your life. Perhaps it begins when you become conscious enough to choose what your life is for. And now, at last, we can put it all down. Because here is the final image of the night, and it is the one we opened with, come home again. Money can be lost and earned again. It always could. Possessions can be replaced. Plans can fail and be redrawn, and fail better. Almost everything is recoverable, and that thought, which sounded like a warning hours ago, can be felt now as what it truly is, a reassurance. The stakes of all those daylight games are lower than they pretend. Nearly everything can be rebuilt. Only this evening exists once. And look what you spent it on. Not on the marketplace, not on the gallery, not on the moving line. You spent it here, in the dark, attending to your one life, which is the most extravagant purchase available to a human being. And tonight it cost you nothing but the willingness to rest. There is nothing to solve before morning. Let that arrive not as an idea but as a physical fact, traveling through you the way warmth travels through a house. Your life does not require a verdict tonight. The questions are planted and can be trusted to grow in their own dark, exactly as you are about to trust yourself to yours. So let go of the day now, piece by piece, the way you might set down parcels inside the front door. The unanswered messages, set down. The unfinished lists, set down. They keep perfectly. The faces, the numbers, the small frictions of the afternoon, set down, set down, set down. Feel how the bed takes the weight of you, completely, requiring nothing, the way still water takes a leaf. Your breathing has grown slow and deep without being asked. The wisest part of you already leading the way, already halfway there. Somewhere far off, the world is still humming its bright, urgent hum. Lights in empty offices, feeds scrolling for no one, and none of it, not one flicker of it, needs you before the sun. The clocks can mind themselves. The horizon can keep its number. You are off the market, off the stage, off the road. Only this room now, only this warmth, only the soft weight of blankets, and the dark being kind, and each breath a little longer than the last. Out, and further out, like slow waves leaving the shore, unhurried, certain, carrying you with them now, gently, all the way down into the deep and dreaming quiet, where everything you truly own is waiting, and everything else was never yours to carry. Sleep into power, guys. Good night.
you.